Hello, my name is Nathan Perez, and I will be doing my presentation today for police systems and practices on the police use of force and accountability in modern policing. Now, this presentation focuses on how police use force in the everyday world and as to why accountability can be an important factor. Now, through this, I will also touch on a few recent cases that have had some reforms on them. Now, for the second slide, it is why use of force exists. Now, the use of force exists in order to maintain public safety, in order to protect officers as well as local civilians, and in order to help enforce the law. This helps provide criminal control or helps control the criminals and dangerous situations that may happen. Now, a quote that I found while doing my research says police officers are authorized to use force to protect themselves and the public in situations that may threaten safety. And this was written by Terrell and Zimmerman in 2022, and you can find it on page 160. Now, the use of force is built into the acts of policing because officers tend to deal with situations that can be unpredictable, but they can also be dangerous as well. The research shows that it is a necessary tool when one's safety becomes threatened, but it is meant to be used with certain limits and not to exceed those limits. Now, when force can become a problem through the misuse of authority, through a lack of clear judgment, and the use of excessive or unnecessary force. This can cause an escalation in the process instead of de-escalation, which would be bad for the case because escalation could cause certain mishaps in the community that officers don't want to deal with and that shouldn't be dealt with. Now, issues may come up where an officer can judge a situation wrong and they can rely on the use of force too quickly. And instead of calming the matter down, they decide to use poor decisions, and that can make the matter more dangerous. And instead, if they just use the right calming down and calm the suspect down, the use of force would not have to had to been used. Now, when it comes to important law standards, situations can change at a quick pace. They are not to be judged off of reflection from experience or off of the past. Now, they must be reasonable, and these are based off of what the officer may witness in the moment. Now, in the case of Graham versus Connor in 1989, this was established that the reasonableness of a particular use of force must be judged from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene. This was found in my research from Walker and Archbold in the year 2019 on page 45. Now, the picture I found, it shows how compliance does relate to the certain things as policies, standards, laws, rules, regulations, and requirements. Now, through the judge system, courts don't tend to focus on these situations with the right recollection. Instead, they may tend to focus on what an officer would do in the given moment under the stress at hand. So they tend to focus on what the officer would do under the right circumstances and not what he really did do, and if it was wrong or right, but what the right aspect should have been done in that situation. Now, the factors that may influence a use of force. Now, on this chart that I have in the image here, it shows how escalation can go all the way back like high and then can come back down to de-escalation. In the green is where there's no force, yellow is where it gets a little bit more force, and then orange is less lethal, which would be like a taser, and then the red would be the deadly force, which would be probably like a handgun. And the force is caused by a suspect's behavior, the level of threat that is given by a civilian or the community, the environment surrounding the officers and what the suspects may be threatening, and it also consists of what the officer's training levels looks like and the level of experience the officer may have. Now, the use of force decisions are never easy, for officers have to quickly decide and interpret the suspect's behavior. Through this, there's multiple aspects of risk because they have to react in seconds in deciding to pull if they have to pull their handgun out or if they pull their less lethal out, and deciding how to keep the situation under peace, under a aspect of peace, and having to keep the whole situation under control, and not letting the community get routed up, where depending on where the situation may be happening at. Accountability systems. There are internal affair investigations. There is the criminal prosecution, as well as the civil lawsuits, and there's also discipline in the department. Now, accountability, it focuses on the officers not having to answer to the department, but as well as to the legal system and to the public as well. Now, through this approach, it helps prevent the abuse of power that officers may figure that they have. And this helps because the department doesn't just punish them, but the legal system punishes them as well through cases, as every person has their own rights and their own use of rights to take it up in court. And that's where the legal system comes into play here, and the public comes into play, with not just the department getting the officer in trouble if they use their use of power for too much. Now, the role of technology. Now, here in this picture, this is what a body worn camera tends to look like, and through the technology, these have influenced the newer era into videos being better help, as it's right here on the chest and can film practically everything the officer's doing, as well as dash cameras surrounding surveillance footage. So, for example, like a restaurant or like a drive-in, like McDonald's, there's cameras all over to try to capture what's going on in the restaurant, outside the restaurant, and to picture and to help put a name to a picture, and just if something may have happened in that sense. There's also data tracking systems to track maybe someone's phone or someone's car if stolen. And there's also body, and in this quote I found during my research, it says body worn cameras provide objective documentation of police citizen encounters, and this can reduce complaints and improve accountability. And this is found or written in 2022 and found on the second page. Now, through this, technology has helped change policing through transparency. Through body cams and other video evidence that help specify what actually happens, which helps in holding officers accountable and protecting them from possible false claims. Protecting them by if a citizen wrongfully says the officer did something, and then the officer has the body worn camera to help prove that they did not do what the person may have said they have done, and it helps hold them accountable, but also helps prove other people's rights if they did use abusive power as well. Now, next is the public awareness and social movements. This is where there is increased media coverage, as well as public protest, and the role of social media plays a huge part. For another quote I found, it says social media has amplified public scrutiny of police actions, which drives reform efforts. Now, the attention of the public has grown over the years, for incidents and videos have put policing practices into the spotlight and caused a need for reform in departments. And with the prime example, obviously, being back in 2020, was the case of George Floyd. Now, this picture here is of a protest, I believe, when George Floyd was wrongfully killed by a police officer, and just how it proves how big social media and the news coverage made it big to be back then. Now, improving police accountability. There is training towards de-escalation, or the improvement would be training towards de-escalation, bias training, a policy reform, and police being involved in the community. Now, newer reforms, they make it the goal of prevention instead of a reaction, with the goal being to reduce the need for force through training, policies, and relationships with the community. Now, what this means is that the bias training could mean they see everyone as equal and not just make an assumption off of someone's race or of the environment that they live in, for example, the neighborhood. Now, as well as the training towards de-escalation, it could be more of a talking set base, I guess, in the policing. And community involvement, this is just being involved in the community, driving around in their police cars, or just going around meeting new people and just being the local policeman that shows he cares for his community. Now, conclusion. The use of force is necessary but can be risky, for accountability through police allows fairness. The ongoing reforms are definitely still essential in today's world, for there is still a need of balance between safety and the rights, which is very important. Now, in all, there is a balance that is needed, where officers need to have authority and the upper hand to remain safe in the situation. for they play the good guy when they try to arrest suspects, and to keep them the good guy and to keep them safe, they still have to have a sense of authority when pulling people over or de-escalating situations that may have been escalated for some criminal reasons. Now, through the authority, they can't abuse the use of power for the protection of the people and their rights, and the people's trust is still important. For without it, policing would be, I don't want to say corrupt, but people would be very against it, and people still are very against the use of policing today. But in my personal opinion, it is what keeps our society safe and at ease and just at measure in every day. And without them, the world would be very corrupt. Now, finally, this is my references, and these are the references that I used to help find my research and to provide the notes and bullet points I used. Thank you for your time.